Welcome to Divisive Issues, a comic book podcast where we talk about comic books. I'm Ryan.
I'm Sly.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl.
Yay, we made it again.
Somehow, we've met at this juncture.
So, our comic this week is part 2 of our Spooktacular Halloween special.
Dracula's back?
Yeah, Dracula is back.
Can't wait.
He's green and he's called Swamp Thing now, but it's Dracula.
Can I just say, I've heard about Swamp Thing for years, probably from you fuckers, but like so much, and I had never even, I didn't know what he looked like. I didn't know what he was.
You could probably guess he's a big swamp.
I had mentally associated him with the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Me too.
Yeah, I felt that way too before I read Swamp Thing.
He's very inspired by that kind of creature. But we're doing Swamp Thing by Alan Moore. This was Alan Moore's first work at DC. He was known for working on British comics like Judge Dredd before this.
He did Dredd?
I don't know if he did Judge Dredd specifically, but he did work on the comic Judge Dredd was featured in 2000 AD, which I think it makes probably likely he worked on Judge Dredd. I should look that up.
Man, that'd be kind of funny reading, or if like
Can someone fact check this asshole? He's just making these claims and no one even fact checks.
We should one day do Mark Millar doing Judge Dredd's work and see how edgelord is compared to his later stuff. But either way. This was his first DC work, and this before Watchmen, before V for Vendetta, before he became the Alan Moore you know today. He was just a really good writer that DC picked up because they liked his British work.
Wait, I want to give some lore. I never get to give lore.
All right, give some lore.
So when during this era, it's like called like the British Explosion. Or the British Invasion is the actual term.
The British Explosion.
Yeah, the British Invasion.
That's the XXX parody of it.
Yeah. Where Karen Berger was an editor for DC, who she basically is the reason why Vertigo exists. And
yep. This whole Swamp Thing led to the creation of Vertigo, basically.
Yeah, so she's the one that brought over like Grant Morrison and Neil Gaiman and Alan Moore and Peter Milligan over to DC from, like Sly was saying, 2000 AD. And it's still DC, but all of the titles that they wrote, like Animal Man and Swamp Thing, eventually became Vertigo.
Yeah.
So this is like, even though the issues themselves have DC written on them, the trades have Vertigo on them. Like this.
I was wondering, like, this. You just said DC, and I was like, "There's no way this is a DC comic. It doesn't feel like it to me."
Yeah. So what happened is like when books like Sandman and Swamp Thing became super popular. And they realized that there was a market for this like much more mature and like literary style of comic writing. They made it a whole separate imprint where you didn't have to follow the same rules as DC or the same continuities or anything like that. So like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, this is my favorite Alan Moore book, does a lot where Batman does show up from time to time, or like the Justice League will be an issue, but it's yeah.
What is Batman gonna talk to Swamp Thing about?
Well, Swamp Thing is an Earth elemental that like decides to take.
Well, let me explain what Alan Moore did with Swamp Thing first.
Okay, if you want super in-depth analysis of Alan Moore's big change to Swamp Thing, the Comics Canon did an episode on it, and they go into a lot more detail than we're going to. But I'll let Sly sum it up.
Well, basically, Len Wein was the original writer for Swamp Thing, and he made Swamp Thing a generic creature of the Black Lagoon. And
basically, a guy was like caught in an explosion and fell in a swamp, and then like became the Swamp Thing.
Yeah,
sounds like every other fucking superhero.
Yeah, pretty much.
I was hit with an explosion, and now I'm a spider.
The radiation.
But Len Wein, the original creator of Swamp Thing, was the guy who actually called Alan Moore and said, "Come to DC, write my book for me." And
Do my job.
No, but like he's like saying, I really like your work. Please, I want to give you a book at DC. I think Swamp Thing would be a good fit. And what Alan Moore did was he basically revealed that when the guy got to explosion and turned to Swamp Thing, that's not actually what happened. What happened was the man died, and his basically like I forgot like his DNA or something seeped into the.
He was working on this chemical late one night.
Yeah.
And basically the chemical, when it was supposed to, it's a biorestorative formula where it's supposed to like help plants grow forever to cure like world hunger. And what it did was it seeped into his body, so the plants kind of took on his consciousness. Yeah. So he woke up thinking he was Alec Holland, but he's actually just like a plant simulacrum. So like his body has fake organs. Like, so he has a pumping heart, but only because his body thinks that he's supposed to. It doesn't actually do anything.
Yeah, it started out as cliche, like I'm a monster, like Ben Grimm or another character like Hulk. But basically what happened in Alan Moore's run was he realized Alec Holland was dead. I'm a guy that thought he was Alec Holland, and basically the story, a lot of Alan Moore's runs is him learning how to let go of his human side and embrace this earth elemental he became, basically.
I like the idea that Alan Moore came in and he's like, no, this guy's dead. Like, he's gone.
In his second issue.
With Don Blake. No, he's dead.
That's kind of what Alan Moore does, though. He always deconstructs every book he writes on, in a lot of ways.
Well, I have to say that, like, when I was reading this, not knowing what to expect, it seems like Swamp Thing is like, he's like a narrator or observer of other stuff more than he is the main character. Like,
yep.
It's like Alan Moore's like, I want to tell this cool story. Swamp Thing's gonna watch. Like, that's
definitely like that's part of one of his main themes, especially this part of the book. So we're doing issues 40 to 42
of volume 2 of in the 80s.
Yeah, and this is about halfway through his run. So about halfway through, what he did was he introduced the character of John Constantine, and what basically John Constantine did was like led Swamp Thing around the country and was like, look at this fucked up shit. And like it would be like vampires or like zombies or like all different types of horror elements. And through it, he would have Swamp Thing push his limit as an earth elemental and like help him develop new abilities. So like in this story, before we started, he had just learned that he could put his consciousness back into plant life and regrow his body if he was to die. So, like, this story's right at the peak of him being like, I'm not human at all. Like, I have to redefine what it means to be alive. And it's really fucking good stuff.
It was so surprising and cool to me that I want to read the rest of Swamp Thing so bad now because I just didn't expect it to be... I didn't expect it to be like this. And I also haven't read any Alan Moore in so long. I was actually thinking yesterday, I'm like, I read Watchmen pretty recently. That was... that was
Killing
7
Joke.
years ago.
Yeah, Killing Joke.
Oh, and Killing Joke, right.
But like, I originally read Swamp Thing because I was complaining about how Alan Moore always has rape in it, and somebody was like, well, his Swamp Thing doesn't have any rape. Oh, except for the part where Swamp Thing's consciousness is flying through space and a sentient satellite rapes him repeatedly for thousands of hours. And I was like, wait, what? So I went back, and that's in like his second or third to last issue. He gets so close to not using rape. But I read his run as like I gotta see what this weird thing is, and it floored me. It's just absolutely amazing.
I'm not worried, but I don't think our narration, our like going through the story, is going to come off across like as well as the story does itself because of the way Alan Moore writes. Like, it's kind of like trying to narrate Watchmen is like. You're not gonna get really the feel of it because he constantly goes to the same, like to a certain line or panel that he just keeps repeating over and over. And
well, it's like trying to describe any kind of book that has a certain sense of style or prose in its writing, where it's like it's real hard to be like, this is really good and interesting because this is repeating without reading it yourself.
Well, I'm glad that we started with the Killing Joke Alan Moore, like as our first Alan Moore book, of comparing like how hard it is to adapt his style, and I think we talked enough about like where that you just can't do it without just reading it, and like I think that'll bleed through into this episode quite a lot.
Yeah. I think this comic, like a lot of Alan Moore works we're gonna do, you should read it before we listen to us narrate what happens in it.
Yeah, I would recommend.
I always bring up the Watchmen scene with fucking Dr. Manhattan on the moon, or on Mars. But I it's like quintessential in my mind of like something that you have to just experience by reading the comic.
Yeah,
like, talking about it, putting it in film it just doesn't capture it.
Speaking of the comic,
Well, one thing I want to mention is also the art, because the art is Stephen Bissett. Is it Bissett?
I
guess with John Totalbin doing the inks, and except for the second part, which is Alfredo Alcala, and I love Stephen Bissett's art a lot. I mean, did you guys like the art?
I liked it.
I liked it.
I didn't.
Really?
Not really. The thing I thought was really cool, I was like, I can dig this, is that the panels on each of the pages kind of like, none of them are orthogonal. Everything's always like at a weird angle, especially when action starts, and then everything's kind of like slanted or skewed.
That's awesome.
There's uses of like circles and just a lot of angles in the work that's really cool. but I wasn't that impressed by the guy's art itself. I feel like he has a couple zoom ins on faces, and I wasn't digging it. I was like, no, this isn't a good face.
Okay, I mean that's fair.
Like some more of like the horror stuff, like how he draws Swamp Thing, that's great. But it's more just like the regular people didn't really get they didn't seem like people. They looked like these like cartoon masks. It's weird.
They do have weird faces sometimes.
Yeah.
A lot of I feel like a lot of horror artists have this problem where they draw the horror stuff better than the real people stuff.
This is also very, I don't want to say typical, but this is the kind of style that most of the Karen Berger era art has. Like, if you've read Sandman, there's a lot of art, like, I'm not exactly the same, but, like, in a similar kind of tone and shading. And, like, I'm a big fan of that style, but it's not for everybody.
All right, so Phil, can you start off this comic?
Sure. So the first issue we read, issue 40, the cover has a wolf howling at the moon smeared with blood. It's
a
like
blood
a
red moon, too.
Yeah. And Swamp Thing just hanging out, looking at the wolf.
He looks like he's gonna go grapple the wolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it sound like he's chilling. Like, oh, someone's just hanging out, drinking a beer, watching some TV.
And the first scene is at a supermarket, and you get the theme of the comic from the first line, where it says the music system hums Moon River beneath its breath, and she wonders briefly why women's lives should be punctuated with blood. And basically, she's shopping in the supermarket and getting.
It's an unnamed woman, so.
Yep, we don't know who she is.
Yeah, just woman.
And she's buying like pads, like for menstruation.
There's an ad for Phil, which they refer to as a disposable douche.
Fuck you.
Yeah, it's like this big. It's plastered on a building, which I thought was weird. It's like, do douches advertise? I mean, companies that sell douches advertise.
Phil, do you advertise?
Douches do advertise.
Yeah, have you heard of Divisive Issues, guy? So she's shopping, and you see like an ad for knives, and it's like, here's good news for housewives. And then the picture for the pads is like sanitary napkins, Feminex for freedom, and there's a woman like running in the fields. But as she's shopping, there's like a cut to another scene where it says, long ago, the Penamaquat women were taken each month by their grandmothers and confined in the Red Lodge. The lodge stood upon stilts, that its dark and sullen female power should not taint the earth. And basically, while she's shopping, we keep cutting between her buying these like feminine products and the Red Lodge, where it seems like these women were, at that time of the month, like chained up. They couldn't stand or lie down. They were not allowed to touch anything. They were fed
food,
from these sticks by the old women of the tribe. And we get this black panel with just blood splatter, and it says all she can imagine is their anger. And this becomes like a recurring theme now. As she's going home, she sees the disposable douche, and their anger and darkness turning, and it zooms in on the blood splatters.
And as it zooms in more and more, it looks more and more like a face, angry face forming.
Yeah.
And each time we go to, like, again, this is kind of hard to describe, but each time we go to that face of the blood splatter on the black background, we get more of the anger narration, like their anger and darkness turning,
And
unreleased.
even the lettering, it's getting, like, the actual words are getting bigger and bigger.
And it's like connecting the moon, the cycle of the moon and the woman's menstruation cycles. And it says, like, they were in this cottage, unable to touch anything. Men feared the woman's touching anything during that period. And they were unable to even see the moon during that time. And their anger at that not being able to see the moon and stuff.
Their anger in darkness turning, unreleased, unspoken. Its mouth a red wound. Its eyes hungry for the moon.
Yeah.
Hungry like the wolf.
And as she's walking home, we're talking about all this like female anger and like power, and she's walking home seeing these ads targeted towards women, an adult bookstore where numb-eyed women stare through zippered leather masks, and she's like, the good wife goes home to prepare her husband's table.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that I didn't really notice until just now that's so interesting about Alan Moore is he comes from England and writes this run, and he introduces so much history of America into this book. Like, here he has all this Native American imagery, and like soon we're gonna see a lot of like Civil War era themes, and that's so fascinating to me that like he comes from England and does more with American history than I think anyone at DC had done up to this point.
I've noticed that a lot of British writers. One of my favorite runs is by a British writer called Peter Milligan. You mentioned him, and his first story arc in Shade of Changing Man is about the JFK assassination, how it affected America. And it's interesting how British writers are able to tap into American history and how it affects our culture more than a lot of American writers do.
Do you think maybe we kind of take our history for granted and don't
Definitely.
see it as like an interesting narrative?
Yeah, because it's just like, oh, it's just what happened. Whereas, like, I think a British person looks at it and it's like, well, how did this shape the American people?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And also the fact that we do kind of harp on stuff like the American Civil War. Like, it's one of the most like mythicized parts of American history. But we focus on very specific things with it. Civil War, World War II, like we focus.
Yeah, we romanticize very specific.
Like the action parts, we're like, and then we freed the slaves and at Gettysburg, and
yes,
like
things where like America was doing what was right, what was necessary.
Yeah.
But we focus a lot less on the social implications of things.
Yeah.
So
Instead of like, hey, what do we do to the Native Americans? Or what is their history?
So when they talk about them being angry at the moon, it cuts to a picture of the moon and Swamp Thing making out with his girlfriend from the moon as the big splash page.
this was really weird to me. Like it's like this white-haired hot girl making out with this.
Moss Man.
Okay, I need to give a little bit of extra in this. Abby and Swamp Thing is honestly easily in my top 3 favorite comic book couples. But the way it's hard to see it out of context.
It is.
Because so much of the run leading up to it is she's like terrified of him, and like slowly as he's coming to grips with losing his humanity, she is also bringing out his human side, like in the run leading up to this. And like I think it's the first annual or maybe it's the second annual, as weird as this sounds, their first sex scene is the most beautifully written sex scene I've ever seen in comic books. And it's really weird. Like it's like you were saying with Elmore, it's really hard to explain why it's so masterfully written. And just taking 2 or 3 issues out of context, the creepiness and like the weirdness of this like young beautiful woman making out with this swamp monster, that was a major theme at the beginning that the reader at this point has made peace with. That like seeing it taken like this is very strange.
I do think the thing I really love about the way he writes the two of them is a lot of times when you show romance in earlier comics and a lot of fiction still to this day, you just have to talk about how much they're in love and love and love and love. While Abby and Swamp Thing actually have like funny lines to each other and charming moments.
I wanted to bring that up, that it's so cool. In just these 3 issues, you get a really good grasp on their relationship, and it's because they have dialogues with each other. They're like, oh, what do you think of this? Or it's like, she asks him just things about what he feels about himself. Like, he can reanimate himself pretty much anywhere. So they like talk about him just coming out of the ground somewhere, and like how like interesting that is. And it's cool to have a couple that's doing that instead of just like being all physical or talking about their potential future. It's like, because couples hang out. That's what they do.
Yeah, most of the time they just talk about other things besides themselves.
And that's what I mean about like, even this is 2 pages and you guys are already like, this is a cool relationship. You know, and like it's a swamp monster and a girl with like long white hair. Normally it would be so weird, but Alan Moore just like makes it work right away.
There's one thing that is relevant to the story where she's talking to him and says, you know what? You don't ask me to feed you or tidy the swamp or iron shirts, and I get fresh flowers all year round. You're just the sort of person I imagined marrying when I was little, except, you know, not green or with all the patches of fungus. But it kind of sets up this like, we're talking about feminine societal expectations of women, and she does not have to do those things for Swamp Thing. And then we cut immediately to Kenneth Cook, Maine, where we have a traditional, I guess, situation
old school kind of like, like
and
with a Homer Simpson type husband and a good housewife, which is the woman we saw at the shopping mall,
and she's like serving dessert, and the guy's like, no more cookies for Joni here, she's still trying to take off the baby weight even though it was 2 years ago.
Just being a complete asshole. And at the same time, he actually makes fun of the Indian lodge that was here. He's like, Indians sent their squaws here when they got cranky around that time of the month. And I don't blame him. Ha, ha, ha. And at the same time, the anger and darkness turning keeps happening, and that face looks very much like a face now. The blood splatter.
Yeah.
And you see the women getting fed again with like these sticks. And at the same time,
because they couldn't touch them, so they fed them with sticks and stuff, like at a distance.
Yeah. And even she starts to get like nauseous and panicked and anxious, and she starts to look at the moon,
Yeah.
And we again have that line where she's hungry for the moon. Something soft and insistent seems to rise in her throat, pushing its way up from inside her. And she turns from the window and shivers, swallowing hard. And she makes the coffee. And after the visitors have gone, Roy remarks that her eyebrows need plucking, and that night she sleeps facing the wall. And then it just keeps cutting to her, like, in this shithole life with a shithole husband, and
all these feminine products are, like, sprinkled around the words.
Yeah. As time passes, and she has this kind of... I see why Darryl doesn't like the art sometimes. Like, the faces are weird, but...
He tries to use, like, one unidirectional shading to apply, space to her face, or to give it depth. But it doesn't come across that well.
Yeah. All the next day her stomach aches as if something savage and restless were curled there. Something that shifts and twists, impatient with its incarceration. Something growing. Then Swamp Thing shows up here, and she's outside now, and she's just like... And the man comes out yelling, well, you were supposed to have dinner ready half an hour ago. And she's like, go away from me. And he starts saying, oh, PMS, right? You women, I've had enough of this crap. You want to fight? And then...
Yeah, not fight like physically, like argument. You want to have an argument? That's...
Yeah, right. And and then we get that line one more time.
That's one thing to clarify. Like, this guy isn't like an abusive husband. He's just like a typical oblivious douchebag.
Well, he even says when he's talking to her about the Indians, he's like, he's like, oh yeah, the Indians used to be here with their squaws or whatever, but like she would know more about that than me. Didn't you read a book about that or something? And like doesn't even listen for her answer. Like he's even mocking her for like. She obviously brought this information to him, and he was like, "Yeah, that's pretty funny."
But it is worth necessary to point out. This isn't like an extreme abusive relationship. This is just what a lot of people probably had in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, a traditional like housewife husband situation where he's expecting a lot from her, and she just has to sit there and take it. And then for one last time, we get the line: "Their anger and darkness turning, hungry for the moon," and she starts falling over, and out of her mouth. Comes a snout, and it just bursts out of her skin. This giant fucking werewolf with long hair.
Yeah, she like sheds her skin through, and you can see her female skin on the ground, like
it's just like flat, like a discarded
like
jacket,
all wrinkled.
Yeah, it comes out of like nowhere here, but like in the bigger narrative, this was like the kind of thing that kept happening of like this crazy supernatural thing coming out of the mundane Americana.
Yeah, and like Darryl said before. As this like crazy stuff starts happening, the panels get really like angled. So it's like this centerpiece where he's trying to lock the door, and we get these sharp triangular panels.
He runs from her and runs aside, then locks the door.
Yeah,
I do want to point out that he's like, Phoebe, stop this! I'm calling the police. Like she's a wolf monster. Like that's such a ridiculous thing to say.
I like they says, "You hear me?"
Yeah.
Like they'll speak to her.
Phoebe, stop this crazy thing!
And he's just yelling for help. Anyone help me? She's chasing him, and Swamp Thing shows up, and he's like,
he passes out because Swamp Thing's too much for him.
Okay, you have a werewolf trying to attack. You watch into the werewolf, and then you run to the backyard, and then there's a giant green swamp monster there. Like, it's kind of understandable.
I know.
Yeah.
I wasn't criticizing it. I just thought it was funny. He runs into Swamp Thing, and he's like, "Oh."
And they have a really cool scene where there's like a standoff between Swamp Thing and the werewolf, and you have a panel with one of his eyes and a panel with one of her eyes, and it says, "In my mind I hear my own voice speaking, saying, 'I am of the earth. What are you?' And in my mind another voice answers, 'I am woman. Stand not between me and my wrath.'"
He can sense the elemental energy in her being as strong as his, but he feels like he doesn't have the authority to stay her hand, but he feels like he should anyway, just to keep her from murdering her husband.
So this is kind of like the powerful theme of like he says, "I don't have the authority to stay her hand." So he's like, "You're like me. You're some sort of like spiritual, supernatural thing, and the human in me wants to stop you from killing this man, but like the natural balance makes me not want to."
Yeah.
Yep. And they fight a little. I mean, not really. She throws him because he's like, "It's not my place of power. This is hers."
Yeah.
So this is her where the lodge was. She's about to rip his head off, and he's like, "I loved you. Don't kill me. Don't kill me."
Her husband's head off.
Yeah, right. Sorry.
And she says, "Manic stench of his fears in her nostrils. She notes without surprise that he has sold himself. Wretched man. Pathetic man."
She draws back her paw. One blow will remove the top of his head. Ugly man. Cowardly man.
And still, in the end, she cannot bring herself to do it. She understands at last the nature of woman's curse, and she shrieks her despair at the moon-bleached sky. And then, so she like doesn't kill him. She's howling at the moon,
And it's just her in her impotent female rage, just smashing everything. They smashed the greenhouse, the mailbox, and the car.
I'd like to think that that's Sly's commentary, that it's her impotent female rage and not the theme of the book.
But like, fuck you. But like, it's basically because like she can't, even though she has all this rage inside her, like she can't bring herself to hurt her husband.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's why they said before that she understands the nature of woman's curse. Like she doesn't want to do it, but the rage inside her is so great, and she basically just runs through the town, seeing fucking bridal stuff being sold, and she knows that there was no escaping from the Red Lodge.
Yeah, and the Red Lodge is that place where the women were kept in when they were basically to keep their power away from the men when they're menstruating. And because they need to be tainted, and basically now she's making the connection that the whole society that man has set up is basically the Red Lodge to keep women under control.
Yeah, and it goes back to that one more time, which is another awesome panel where you have a woman splattered in red with all these panels of the wolf running, and it says they were kept there in the dark, squatting with nothing to dwell upon but beyond the fact that they were unclean. Even the touch of their shadow would sour the land, blighting the crops that grew there.
I mean, that's a thing we see in a lot of major religions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually did happen. That's in the Bible, that you need to take a woman outside of the town until she's done menstruating. And if she gets blood on anything, you have to get rid of it.
And it's something you don't really think about. Like, well, since it's so far from our past, like this character is like focusing like how it would have felt to be in a lodge when you're in pain and agony, and like nobody would want to touch you, and they'll feed you with sticks. Like it's like something we don't think about in a society, like how that would have felt like to be a woman that time and age.
But
like,
Alan Moore draws the parallel so well, where like if she's menstruating, her husband doesn't value her opinion. Marketing is like, do everything you can to hide it. Like, use this douche and like all these sanitary wipes.
Use this film.
Yeah, so it's like all these things to make it so invisible.
Yeah.
That like no one knows. So and that parallel is drawn so powerfully in this issue.
And she goes basically smashing through like a dirty magazine shop.
Yeah.
And then Swamp Thing catches up with her and is like, "Let me help." And she again says, "I am woman. I seek release from this stifling place that has been built for me." And he's like, "I can't give you that." And then she says, "Then give me death." And she runs towards the supermarket, and Swamp Thing doesn't try and stop her. She smashes through.
This is what I wanted to bring up earlier that I was really surprised about, is because going into this, and all I knew is Swamp Thing was a big green guy, I was used to superhero comics. It's like, all right, he's going to fight the werewolf. They have to fight. And it's so weird that he just stands there and he's like, "I feel for your pain. I'm sorry I can't do anything." And that she's talking back to him about what she's feeling, and she's trying to like abate her hunger. And it's like we talked about before, it's really refreshing to be like, wow, this is actually like, it's two people kind of talking in the midst of all this action, instead of the action centered around like who's stronger than the other.
And in this story, he's the first person to listen to her about anything.
That's why we talked about in Spider-Man Reign, when Ryan said, "Oh, it's okay because he's kind of a big superhero fight at the end because that's what people expect." In the '80s, people were already defying that expectation. So
Alan Moore though, like most people are not Alan Moore.
Yeah,
Well, no, but there was
very true.
there was a lot of like that whole British invasion era is a lot of this kind of thing. Where you're
I think you mean the British explosion.
yeah, when you're like expecting this and they turn everything on its ear, and like that's one of the reasons why late '80s DC is my favorite era of comics that exists, because there's so many things that you're like, wait, you can't do that. That's not how it's supposed to work.
yeah.
And the climax of the story, she smashes through the supermarket, again smelling all these things that are being sold for women, and she says, "The odor of women's lives grown irrevocably stale. The Red Lodge is everywhere. Why does no one see it? Why do they shuffle so passively into that darkness?" She tears at it with lacerated paws, trying to rip away its impersonal striplet mask and reveal the fetid shadows beneath, and her useless fury. And then she sees, like from the beginning of the story, that rack of knives that says, "Here's good news for housewives."
And all the knives are like pointed out in a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a poor kind of freedom, but in the end, it is the only kind she
It's
has.
a poor kind of moonlight. It's a poor kind of freedom,
Yeah, you're right.
which is so good.
Because it draws back to the silver spoon when she was holding it. It was earlier, and she's like, she doesn't need this kind of silver. She needs something big and round like the moon.
And she jumps into the knife rack, gets impaled on it, and she turns back to her woman form.
And so Swamp Thing, she says to Swamp Thing, "Take me outside. I don't want to die indoors." And Swamp Thing carries her outside, and everyone's just like, "Oh my god, it's a giant swamp monster, holy woman!" but none of them stop him as he put laser down in front of the moon.
And she does ask, was her husband all right at the end? That's the last question she asks him, and he says yes, and she says good. That's good. Oh, look at the moon. She's so beautiful. And then she dies.
Then we cut to
He sees John Constantine.
yeah, John
He's like,
Constantine.
hey, go to Louisiana. And he's like, okay.
And that's where we got to our next issue in Louisiana.
Swamp Thing 41.
I want to bring up real quick that actually the first issue we read is unrelated to these next two issues, other than it just has Swamp Thing in them. So
Yeah. we picked that first one as a bonus because this story is only 2 issues, so we thought let's add in another good issue from the previous.
I thought that last issue was a really cool way to do like a one-off kind of issue where you just want to introduce an idea, you want to play around with some concepts, and you want to like conclude the story.
And that's the thing is we talk a lot about how modern comics, like, usually we do like 6-issue arcs or things like that, but like back in the day where you didn't get like these trade paperbacks and these hardcover editions and stuff, you could do so much in the limited format of like 22 pages.
Yeah.
And I miss that a lot. Like, some writers still do it, but you get so much out of that story that like I feel like a writer that's not Alan Moore would probably tell like a 3 or 4 part story about like women and the like all his parallels. They would stretch it out and it would be a lot less powerful for me.
That's why like Phil and Darryl don't get why I like older comics more than like modern ones. I really think a lot of newer comics don't get to the point fast enough, and I think you can do a lot with just one page and more compressed from a storytelling where you get to the point and you do it using the pages you have available instead of.
I also think it's a more powerful metaphor when she's not an existing comic book character. She's not someone that we learn all these specific details about. She is like the modern woman. You know, like she is representing like all of society, that I feel like the more specific she gets as a character, the less uniformly relatable her plot is.
You know, you might say, like, I don't understand why you like older comics. I understand why you like older comics like this. It's just that some of them seem so, like, vapid to me that getting to the
Blade versus Dracula?
Yeah, getting to the point quickly, it's like, cool, but this point sucks. So.
But even in Blade vs. Dracula, I'd much rather have that be 1 issue than 4 issues of setting up Blade getting on the boat, and which is what
I feel like with multi-part series, you can really sit down and like do an in-depth look at a problem or an issue or like an event.
But my beef is if it's 4 issues long and it's 4 issues of a mediocre story. We've had stories like we've had problems in modern comics, me and Ryan, where we like the creative team, we like the writing, but then do a story where we cannot conceivably give a shit about, like. One of Joe's favorite runs, they start doing a time travel plot. He's like, I can't conceivably give a shit about the time travel plot. But then it's like 6 issues. And how do you maintain your attention for 6 issues of a plot you don't give a shit about versus 1 issue?
I mean, it's obviously not uniformly one is better than the other.
Of course. But like, I'm just saying.
No, it is. One is better.
Yep.
It's not
It slides wrong, yeah.
But I'm saying, like, Blade versus Dracula was lame.
I would fucking read that.
Yeah, me too.
But Blade versus Dracula was lame, but it was 1 issue, and the issues before and after it I really liked. So I'd rather eat a shit sandwich once in a while than eat a shit hoagie. Whatever the term is.
What?
He's thinking of like a footlong, like a hero. Like
The phrase is not, I would eat a shit hoagie.
No, he wouldn't. He would eat a shit
Not
sandwich.
yet. Now it is.
We're never gonna fucking finish these 3 issues.
No, we have to make memes sometimes, guys. So shit hoagie's a thing now. Just like magic, not whatever that is.
Magical, not topical? Guess what?
Magical,
Surprise. This is this story.
So, Swamp Thing, issue 41. Cover is a voodoo doll of Swamp Thing with pins and needles in it.
Yep.
And the story opens up with narration saying, what do they think about in the beds beneath the ground? What do the dead people think about? And it switches to a scene of a southern plantation graveyard, and it slowly enters the actual plantation.
Did you notice that Jimi Hendrix has a grave in this graveyard?
No.
Does he?
No.
He does, yeah. And then a guy sings a Jimi Hendrix song later, so there's that.
Wait, and you see that other one is Total something? Isn't that what that last author's or
The
artist's
last
name
inker, yeah.
was? Yeah, he's dead.
They killed him and replaced him with his other inker.
But the camera goes from this grave through the graveyard into the plantation, and you start getting narration illustrating a scene where you could tell it's a black slave owner saying,
Not a black slave owner.
A white guy who owns black slaves.
Yeah.
He's a black slave owner.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Not a black slave owner.
Oh, okay.
But you could tell he's a slave owner, and you could tell he just walked in on his wife having sex with a black man. And he says, like, Charlotte, you are tainted. You are repulsive. Do you understand repulsive? That thing you have consorted with is lower than an animal. Between you foul name of a bird of land. You are no longer fit to bear my children. And she's protesting, and he says, now, Charlotte here has often said that we're all no different beneath the skin. I propose we put that to a test. Take this creature downstairs to the cellar and flay it.
The slave is begging, please don't do this. I didn't mean it. She asked me to do this.
And while these narration boxes are happening, what's being drawn is the plantation in modern times, where it's all run down, cracked, and overgrown, and it's slowly going through the house, and it's going down the stairs to the place where they strung up the slave.
It's a very, like, Tales from the Crypt kind of, like, camera pan in.
Yeah. So you don't see any of the visuals of these people whipping this black man, or you don't see any of these visuals. All you have is narration.
They flayed him, Sly.
Yeah, they didn't whip him. They took his skin off.
Yeah, with a knife.
Yeah, they were the Boltons, apparently.
George R. R. Martin didn't invent flaying.
I know.
George R. R. Martin invented everything in history. That's why he references everything. But and then it cuts to it shows a date and it says July 25th, 1985, Feast of Papagoo, which I don't know what that means.
Probably
Papagooey.
voodoo.
Since it has so much references to voodoo magic, I assume it's something.
Yeah,
that.
it's very like Louisiana, so I assume that's some kind of.
Papa Low Legba. Low Papa Legba.
You get this decorative stuff on the side of the dates, like a snake, and then like this old kind of like shaman-looking guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get that like New Orleans kind of motif right away.
And so we have Abby talking to Swamp Thing, and basically she's like, I don't trust this John Constantine. He's just like, I don't trust this John Constantine either. But he told me to come here, and I guess I'm going to come here. And
well, this is actually where they live. They live right around here.
Oh, that is okay. Never mind then.
Yeah, well, because before in the last issue, John Constantine was like, Swamp Thing's like, I'm not following you fucking around anymore. I just want to go home to Louisiana. And John Constantine's like, LOL, here, go to Louisiana.
Yeah.
Because like Abby knows some of the people in the story from work.
Yeah, and she says like, there's a movie, the place where the plantation is. They're having a movie being filmed there, and they're having.
It's a big new soap opera, actually. Sly. It's not a movie.
Whatever.
It's a show.
But they're having people, descendants of the actual slaves from that place, playing the actual ancestors in the play. And Abby says, so like all the descendants of liberated slaves are earning good money by becoming slaves again. Is that funny or sad? And Swamp Thing says, it's human.
I love that a lot.
Yeah. And then she talks about like I know it's great you can teleport from place to place now that you can kill yourself and reborn yourself as vegetation in another place, but I feel like I'm becoming disconnected. Like now since like we said, like he had a human body because he thought he was human, and now he can be like anything he wants to be, and she's like worried about becoming disconnected, and he says, I am changing, Abby, but I know that whatever I change into will always love you. The disquiet that you feel is unnecessary, and she says no. It's human.
Yeah.
We cut back to the plantation.
The post where the guy was flayed.
Yeah, and there's blood everywhere, and they're checking the blood, and the guy checking says it's human.
Well, it's not like puddles of blood. They're like century old.
It's dried blood on the wall on the pole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the two people checking it out are the two of the actors in the soap opera, and one of them is like basically he's like a kind of like.
He's an SJW.
Yep.
He's an SJW basically, and the woman is like
not racist, but like a little bit.
She's pretty racist.
Yeah.
She doesn't even want to be in the same like scene. They have to have a double for when they're gonna kiss.
Yeah, that's true. She's pretty racist.
The liberal is talking to the woman, saying, "We need to clean up this place." And she says, "I wish to clean up some of the extras." And he says, "Angela, you know it's an incredibly racist comment." And she says, "Oh, so I'm racist, but Carlton's Black Power stuff is okay because he's black, right?" Honestly, Richard, everything he says, you just slap it up. It's pathetic.
I like his response. Oh, now look, that's really oversimplifying a complex political situation.
And she's like, "Oh God, grow up."
And that's still kind of like how the conversation goes nowadays. Where one person's like, "It's complicated," and the other person's like, "No, it's not. It's fucking they're blacks."
That's why I love seeing just like Alan Moore do like a really good take on it, and it's like, how is this happening 30 years later?
This guy is also more nuanced, though, than, like, a typical just, like, SJW kind of guy, because he does have a lot of his own prejudices, and, like, he's so convinced that, like, I can't let anyone see that I'm racist, that, like, he goes so hard the other way.
You think?
That, like, yeah.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that, because you gotta keep jumping ahead. So,
sorry.
So she's like, she says, I get a stand-in for the physical scenes, and then we immediately cut to the black lead actor, who says, I don't care how big she is or how good she'll be for this series. That woman is a sow and a bigot, and I ain't touching her, understood?
Sow.
Yeah.
He does comment on her weight again.
Yeah. And he basically wants a stand-in, too.
yeah, and he doesn't even want to do the show, but because his career is kind of in the shitter.
Because he keeps doing cocaine all the
Yeah,
time.
they're really later on. He keeps doing cocaine, so he's just like, his agent tells him, like, you have to do this fucking soap opera. You have to, like, you have no choice.
And for one panel, they're talking in the rundown estate, and he sees it. The black lead sees it as like prettied up again, and then it goes back to being run down. So it's something's happening here.
Yeah, that's when they bring up the coke stuff, because he's just like, oh, you want coke again? Because he's so spaced out while he's imagining it as the old estate that the agent thinks he's on coke, hallucinating again. So we cut to them rehearsing their lines with the director, and the black lead is angry, saying, "Forget it. Either that line goes or I go. I'm most powerful. Sorry, Miss Rebecca. Geez, you seriously expect me to do this step and fetching stuff?"
They're arguing about the lines and how they're kind of like,
They're kind of like
lowly.
stereotypical.
Yeah.
Oh, please, oh Lord Master, like in the fucking Teen Titans issue we read.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now Moore's like, only a hack could write a fucking story like that. And,
While working at DC.
yeah.
Fuck you guys.
But so the director's like trying to appease him, saying, "Oh, don't worry, we can maybe rewrite the lines. We're still in the early phases." But then they have another flash to the old days of the plantation when it was fresh and new, and
They're in their old clothes too. Like
Yeah.
the black actor now is like in very like raggedy clothes, and the woman is in like a petticoat with an umbrella.
Yeah, it's like similar to what she had on before, but just a little different.
yeah. And then the black actor looks to the woman and says, "You look so beautiful," and everyone's like, "Wow." That performance is really great, but they ignore the director and everyone, and they keep going with the scene, saying, the woman says, "Those are not proper sentiments for someone of your station." And the black guy gets to his knees, saying, "Miss Charlotte, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak out of turn. You're going to have to tell the master about this now?" No, that won't be necessary." And the doctor's like, "Wow, these lines are so great."
Except her name's not Charlotte.
Yeah, your name's not Charlotte. Where are you getting these names from? These are actual names of the script. We changed the names for the soap operas to not offend anyone. Remember, guys?
And then he snaps out of it when the liberal guy comes out. He's like, "Hey, good lines," and he's like, "Don't call me my man."
He said, "Billy, my man." He says, "Don't call him my man."
That was a hot performance, bro.
Us color folks don't say that anymore. But Billy, you know I don't mean to appear patronizing anyway. And he's like, "Just shove it, okay?" And he's like, "I'm gonna get me some sleep, someplace away from you turkeys." And he walks away.
And then the guy goes, "What is it with those people?"
Yeah.
Like, that's what I mean, is he wants all the black people. He wants to be the, like, I am the, like, educated, non-prejudiced liberal. But then as soon as, like, the slightest conflict happens, he's like, "Oh, black people, right?"
Yeah, like he's trying to be the man above it all, but deep down, like when push comes to shove, like he snaps back to an old mentality.
Yeah.
And she says like, he's like, "Geez, what's wrong with those people?" And the woman says, "Maybe he just got tired of you being such an ingratiating liberal jerk all the time. For once I sympathize with him." And this is kind of like showing how first time where she's kind of warming up to the guy.
Yep.
Yeah, they're clearly switching roles, as the liberal guy is going to be playing the slave master.
Yeah. And so we cut to Angie and Swamp Thing, and they find a dead bird.
This is my favorite part of the whole book.
Swamp Thing takes the dead bird into his body.
Before it's not even dead when they find it.
Yeah, it's like dying, but he says like, "Just let go of the flesh, of the pain. Fear not, for the universe is kind." And he puts the bird inside his body. And the woman's and Angie's like, "Oh my God,
Abby.
Abby is like,
Sly.
Abby is like,
Charlotte.
"Oh, is it dead? Alec, what are you doing with it?" And he says, "Placing it inside me, that I might absorb its riches as it decays. Death shall nourish life, and nothing shall be wasted. Is this incomprehensible to you?" And she's just like, no, that's what I like about living with you. Something new every day. And this is like an interesting thing about this series is the idea that like with the werewolf one, that nature is like it's very fair in how it handles things, but human beings we feel like we have to step in sometimes, and stop the natural flow of things.
This just every time that Swamp Thing was in, even though I said he's like a side character in all these issues we read. Like, every time he was in the scenes, I was so interested in him as an Earth Elemental. I didn't know what he was at all when I started reading this.
Swamp Thing and Sandman, to me, are very comparable in that. Like, the main character is kind of a delivery method for interesting stories.
Right.
And, like, you called him an observer. I think that's definitely a good way to put it.
And they also, like, in Sandman and this, too, like, sometimes they don't butt in unless they feel like something...
So Sandman's not like Spider-Man's villain, right?
No.
I think the bird thing is really cool because it shows a lot of times in like any pieces of media, in order to show someone's good, you have to do like something like really urgent or like, you save someone or stop a villain. But here he stays with the bird until it dies. And it's a very small but like beautiful and kind moment that shows you how deep his pathos is.
Yeah. So we come back to the. And I should clarify. Every time they cut back and forth to something happy, usually a time jump. And now it's July 29th, and they have. I think these are times that were, like the anniversaries of when they happened in history, because it says offering of food to Matrix Silverine, offering of flowers to Matrix Lorvana. I think these are historical moments.
Yeah.
And so they're preparing the estate. It's getting cleaned up, and
there's extras everywhere, like making a feast, and they're like, "That's weird. They've been sleeping outside. Isn't that crazy?"
Yeah, and Abby points out like, "Oh, the extras are acting weird. Like I know them because I live around here, but everyone's just acting different now."
I love this line with the liberal guy. He's like, "I'm having trouble with the character of the slave master. Thinking like a racist is so difficult."
That's what I meant before. Like, he's so obnoxious about how not racist he is that like obviously you're racist.
But the black guy says, "What, you think thinking like a slave it comes any easier for me?" And he's like, "Colin, that's not what I meant, and you know it." And they're just like, "Oh my god, please stop it, Jesus fucking Christ!"
Yeah.
Who would have thought like so many racial issues would happen in this fucking story about a plantation? But,
And then great transition here where they're like, "All right, Richard." Richard's the liberal guy, and then it cuts to him in his old overseer getup. With a whip.
He has another flashback to the past, and like he's imagining himself in overseer getup.
And he's like, "You resent? How dare you? You're not fit to speak to me."
You have to say it the right way. You resent? How dare you? You're not fit to speak to me. You're not fit to lick my shoes. It isn't your place to resent anything. He starts whipping the slave actor.
Now, I was actually a little confused by this. Is he imagining this?
He's imagining the whipping, but not the yelling.
Yeah, the yelling is real, but when he snaps out of it, he turns to the black actor saying, "What happened? I didn't mean to hit you like that." And Billy, the black actor, says, "Hit me? What is it? Some kind of head trip or something? Hit me with what?" And basically to show like the whipping was fake, but the yelling, everyone saw that.
And the director has the same thing. He's like, "That was such a fabulous performance. Wow. But why'd you call it Roberta Land? In the show, it's Providence."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Swamp Thing passes by, and he's like passing through the graveyard, and he notices there's salt scattered around everywhere. And he's wondering,
like patterns, like they're like.
It's like the voodoo thing.
Yeah,
like in Hocus Pocus, they do that, right, Sly?
Yeah. Fuck you. But he's like thinking back. And this is why the bird's relevant, because he's thinking back to the bird, saying the bird was allowed to die and decay inside of him, but he feels like the bodies buried here are all still restless, and the spirits are still.
They weren't allowed to move on.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to move on. And so another time jump, August 25th. The house is fully restored. And the director points out, like, that was really fast. And he says, I guess it's like patients in hospitals. Some places just have a will to recover.
Which is cool because the Swamp Thing in the last page says, like, across the field, the renovation continues. Decomposition running in reverse, as if towards a new birth. How long will this strange pregnancy endure? And it's like the house itself does seem to be, the estate seems to be
giving
like,
new life.
It's like a sentient, not sentient, but like it's alive.
And there might be something beneath the ground that might be getting a new life too. Maybe.
Yeah. So the liberal actor, he's talking with the director, and he's talking about them doing spirituals out here, and he says, "These people, they have good jobs and good prospects, but stick them out here and they revert to type." And the director's like, Richard, who are we talking about?" And he says, "Why, the colored, of course. who else will we be talking about? And they're just like, Richard, don't you mean the extras? And he's like, sure, the extras. Isn't that what I said? And he walks off, and the lead actress catches Billy, the black actor,
Doing blow. Doing lines of coke.
It's basically the same conversation he had when he was like, don't tell the master about it, but now it's
Yeah.
like, don't tell the director or my manager that I'm doing cocaine.
Yeah, and the lead actress, like before, she's like, "This is black guy, fuck him." Now she's just like, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone." She says like, "You should stay off the stuff too." Like
She says, I'd hate to see you become a slave to this white junk.
I love
Yeah.
that line. I love it.
and then he accidentally calls her Charlotte, and she's like, "By the way, my name's Angela, but no problem." And she walks off.
Yep.
So then we cut to August 29th, and Angie,
Abby.
it's Angie, right?
Abby.
Abby. So we cut to Abby. She meets one of
Abby
the people playing the extras.
who she knows already.
Yeah, she knows already, and she's dressing like the cliche, like what's her name, Aunt Jemima,
Yeah.
Mrs. Butterworth,
Yeah.
kind of outfit, and like she's kind of in the phase until Abby.
She's pouring salt into these like runes into the ground.
Yeah, and she's kind of in a trance doing that until Abby interrupts her, and she's just like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't recognize you,
Mistress.
And then she's like, "Why are you putting salt?" And she's just like, "Did the film crew tell you to do that?" And he's like, "No." And she's like, "I felt like something I ought to do, you know?" And Abby goes back to Swamp Thing. She's like, "It's so weird. Everyone's acting so weird."
They're pouring salt runes in the ground.
Yeah. And she tells Swamp Thing, we should go tonight. Like, I feel something's going down there. And Swamp Thing is just like, if you are concerned, we can go there now. And she's just like, aren't you going to say it's too dangerous and I should stay here or anything? And he's like, I have too great a respect for your strength. The idea will be ridiculous. And she's like, yeah, that's right. Ridiculous.
And like playing off the last issue, like when she was like, you know, I'm expecting to do all these traditional woman roles, and something's like, that's stupid. And here he's like, he doesn't even fathom, like, why would I do that?
Yeah, this was crazy to see, like, a superhero basically say to his female companion, it's like, hey, let's go together.
Yeah, but I find it funny that Abby's just like, I'm glad you respect my power, but I really don't want to go to fight
Yeah.
this
Yeah, it's cute.
magic voodoo shit.
This next scene is crazy because now like everything's in full swing. This some kind of like festival feast going on, and like all the extras are having like bonfires, and the director's like, what the hell's happening? And
the actor's like the liberal actor playing the slave owner says, "Where's Angela?"
no, he says, where's Charlotte first?
Yeah, he's like, "Where's Charlotte?" I mean Angela. Like, where's Angela? And he's like, "Oh, she's inside with Billy." He's like, "She inside together?" And he takes two slaves. So you two, come with me.
He snaps at them.
Two extras, and they're like, right away, Mr. Wesley.
Slaves.
But two actors playing slaves.
Yeah, they're getting into their roles, so
This is method acting to the extreme.
No, Sly's saying when you put these people in their old place, they revert to type, right, Sly?
Fuck you.
Yeah, the SJW character is actually Sly.
That's what he's a Sly Justice Warrior.
But we cut to the inside the house, and
Angela and Billy, the two lead actors and actor and actress, are like, they're really close on the couch.
yeah, they're having an intimate moment, and he says, "Miss Charlotte, I'm so afraid." And she's like, "Just hold me, William. Nothing will ever happen. I promise you, everything will be." And then the actor playing the slave owner walks in and says, "Well, what have we here?" and he says the lines in the beginning. You are tainted. You are repulsive to me. Do you understand repulsive? As Swamp Thing enters and sees all the craziness going down.
And like it's crazy. Like people are like chanting by the bonfires. They're cutting the throats of chickens to like for the feast, or for some kind of voodoo stuff. And everyone's like, and Swamp Thing and Abby are like, something fucked up is happening here.
Yeah. And the fact they start saying the lines they said in the early first pages, you could tell the sequence of events happening, and it's kind of like a despair mode where you know there's nothing they can really do to stop this chain of events from reoccurring.
Yeah.
And so the people are cutting chickens. They're doing all these crazy stuff, and then the issue ends with them tying Billy to the post that the first actual slave got flayed, and they blindfold him. And the slave owner says, "Now, shall we begin?" End of issue 41. So issue 42, part 2 of the story. What happens in it, Darryl?
On the cover, it is Swamp Thing looking at these hands coming out of the ground, and Swamp Thing's on fire.
And there's zombies everywhere too.
Yeah.
And John Totalbin is back. He's not
Yes.
dead. Oh, he just like the people, like his grave, he was raised.
Yeah, so the inker has come back from the dead.
Even in the creative crew, Al Moore, Subtle, and Nuance.
Yeah, seriously, it's just so crazy.
Alan Moore does like all these little. Whenever he starts an issue, he does like a kind of, like an exercise. He stretches his. Similar to the sea captain in the Blade versus Dracula one, he gives like a little bit of flavor and life to just a miscellaneous part or character.
That's somehow thematic overall to the issue.
Yeah, so it shows the side view of a coffin, and there's a skeleton inside of it, and it says, a century of staring at the ceiling, longing to stretch, to yawn without the jaw falling off, longing to rub the cobwebs from your sockets with yellow knuckles. And it's talking about like how the skeleton's just waiting and waiting there, and I like the line, generation of beetles pass before your unblinking gaze. You watch the rise and decline of their miniature dynasties, making up names for each character, often repeating yourself.
And it has dual narration. It has this narration showing what he's thinking, and at the same time it says, he tried, and tried, and tried, but it was no good. He couldn't sleep, and last panel is a skeleton moving in the coffin.
Yeah.
I love when artists repeat panels just because I feel like it's so... Like, a movie could stay on a shot for a long time, but a comic panel is so intentional. Like, you had to keep either redrawing it or copy-pasting it, that it shows the passage of time, like, really well.
Mm-hmm. And then we get this big page, like a 2-page spread of... it's basically describing all these zombies coming back to life and what it's like to come back to life, because they're not zombies in the sense that they want to go and eat brains. It's like people that died that are now alive again.
That have been unable to rest this whole time, and now finally they're like, we can
find freedom, they say.
Yeah, so that they're celebrating, they're reuniting, and it's like some want jobs, some want homes, some want a right to vote.
The unimagined majority only want revenge, it says.
I like how like old enemies embraced as friends. Like imagine like people who hated each other, they finally rise from the dead after like 300 years.
Yo, did you see those beetle dynasties down there? Pretty sick, right?
They're like, hey, long time no see, we're alive.
They're like, hey. And so they're all rising from the grave, and then we get the name of the comic, Strange Fruit.
Swamp Thing talks about how the land here it feels something in the land here difficult to describe, as if a pattern has been etched upon this place by emotions so fierce and caustic that they burn their imprint into the soil itself.
A pattern of salt.
So what happens next, Darryl?
All the zombies are rising from the dead,
and
I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out what to read and what not to read.
Read it all.
It's so much easier to do the narration when the writer is bad.
Yeah. Because you're like, this is all nonsense, but with Alan Moore, you're like, this is...
Yeah, you're like, which are the really cool parts that you want to talk about?
But what happens next is they meet the Aunt Jemima character, right?
Yeah, and she's basically just been laying the salt down to keep them out, but now like she messed up and
the wind blowed the salt away.
Yeah,
we get some cool drawings of some just like real gnarled zombies.
Yeah,
some of them look like total skeletons, and some of them look kind of recenter.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, they talk about that some people were like recently buried in the plot. I just didn't expect so many people recently to be there, because there are a lot of people that are like, or zombies that are kind of still there.
Yeah.
Still formed. Then we cut back inside, and it's the liberal guy just finished flaying Billy, and he's having the two extras pull the lady back.
Yeah, they're straining her.
She's freaking out. She's like, he's alive. Oh, God, he's still alive.
And in the background is like a rainbow of colors. There's blue, there's green, there's yellow, there's pink, there's orange, and it's like swirling about them.
It's crazy.
It's real kind of like dreamlike.
And actually, the crazy colors that Darryl talked about are in order of the visible spectrum. It's Roy G. Biv back there, so you got that.
And then when it comes to the next picture, there's blackness in the background.
Actually, one other thing I want to say about that is it ends at indigo, but her dress is violet, so like she fills out the visible spectrum with her big Southern belle dress. I think that's just like a cool effect.
Alan Moore, you did it again.
Alan Moore, thanks for that. Thanks for that Easter egg for all us science nerds.
But Abby walks in on this. She opens the door to the basement and sees all this going on.
Yeah, and she's saying the house, it's changing, what's going on? And the liberal guy says, my God, she's wearing trousers. Charlotte, is this some friend of yours? This woman who dresses like a man?
And Abby's like, who's Charlotte? What's going on?
Yep. And the Charlotte lady is still freaking out over Billy getting skinned.
And she says she skinned him of this, and takes a knife from him, and he takes it back from her. And he calls her, give me that back, you adulterous slave loving. And Abby's just like, oh my God, what's going on? What's this place done to you people?
Abby's like, what the fuck is happening?
Your name's Richard Deal, you're an actor, none of this is real. And he goes, is that so? And he just plunges the knife into her stomach.
Yeah.
And then, I love this line, come out. Come on, let's go and see what all that screeching and hollering outside is about. Those savages are kicking up a fit to wake the dead. And then it cuts to a scene with
the Aunt Jemima holding up her salt and saying, oh Lord, I'm sorry, I'm too old, I'm too slow, they're all awake.
Is it racist to keep calling her Aunt Jemima?
Maybe.
Aunt Jemima is based off, she's a racist caricature of like old slave women, so
and she's like put into this role where she's now acting like a slave woman, so I guess we're in the clear.
It's a little racist, but it's okay.
It says us 4 white guys.
What's the archetype called? Like a mammy, I think.
Yeah,
Like she looks like that. Like if you want to avoid calling her Aunt Jemima.
So what does Aunt Jemima do?
she runs into someone she knows among the dead.
Her father. And then she starts crying, and she's like, "Oh no! Like you used to call me pretty when I was a little girl, but now I'm all old and ugly."
I actually really love the scene because she's just like, "Oh, why'd you have to go wake up and see me like this?" And she's just calling her sweet, beautiful Alice, beautiful baby. Let's go together. And I think it's a really cool, sweet.
And they mentioned that they didn't have enough money to give him a proper burial, so they buried him in the slave yard.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what by having lots of younger zombies, I guess that's saying like this is still like a poor neighborhood, that like the black community here hasn't really risen like, to the level that they would have liked after.
That's what I love about that line earlier on where Abby said, like, isn't it crazy that the descendants of slaves are playing slaves for money now, where it's like it makes sense why people would do it because they're locals. If you're poor, you don't have the money to leave your town. But like, and you would take that kind of job. But how fucked up it is that this society basically has put you in a place where your kids and their kids and their kids are going to be living in the same town in the same shitty environment.
Yeah,
marginally getting better.
I love that Alan Moore does this like this through such a personal, like, quick lens. Than being like, look how poor these guys are. You guys get it?
Yeah.
Like Reconstruction didn't work, and like,
again, how crazy this is as Swamp Thing is insane to me. Like, this is a story about, like, we're talking about this like racial stuff, but it's just this swamp monster watching zombies walk by. It's like
I was about to bring up. It was this point where I was reading the story. I'm like, wait, what is going on? Like, what is happening in this story? It's a bunch of zombies rising from the dead, and they're reuniting with like, or at least one of them reunites.
Well, spoilers. What's happening is the zombies are recreating what happened to the plantation the first time, where they rose up and killed the master for flaying that guy.
Yeah, if you look at the 2-page spread earlier, he says all they wanted was liberty. That much was unanimous. Freedom. And as ever, they knew where they must go to ask for it. So, like, they're all going for the master here.
So originally, the slaves tried to burn down the plantation, and because it was rebuilt, the spirits of the slaves, who are also kept in with like the salt and all like the voodoo rituals and stuff, are now trying to overthrow the plantation for good this time.
Well, I knew that. It just seemed like it was a really weird thing because they're going to stop the liberal that's playing the slave owner. I'm like, but it's kind of dumb to ask why is this happening when we just finished an episode about a werewolf coming out of a woman's mouth that's based on menstruation. But for here, it was like, it seemed like the house or the land was part of the problem, and they were using the salt runes to keep the zombies in, but the zombies are all good.
I think you just got to take it as a more abstract thing and be like, it's an abstract experience, like reliving this past.
Yeah, I think because it's like a racial issue, I was just trying to think through the lens of like,
what's going
why
on?
is this like, what is he trying to tell me about race?
I think it's supposed to say like racism is still like what Phil said with the people acting out their ancestors' roles. I think it's supposed to say like how much society still hasn't progressed in a lot of ways.
This is why I'm glad that we kept the werewolf issue in too, because I think what he's going with these two stories is we could put a nice dress on it. It could look nice, but the issues are still very similar. Like the societal roles that we put on people, they might not be exactly the same. They're better, but they're still pretty much like the same concept.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. How, like, I mean, people talk about this a lot with Reconstruction. Obviously, everyone lives in high school, but it's like, you know, the freed slaves might be free, but if you can't read or write, you don't have the money, you are legally not allowed to leave your state without paperwork. You're going to work for your old master for no money, and now have to pay your own rent. It's like, yeah, we're better now, no slavery, but the societal conditions are not too much better.
Yeah. So what happens next, Darryl? What is going on, as you quietly asked?
It cuts back to Abby, who was stabbed, and she says, "This isn't real. It doesn't hurt me. It doesn't feel wet. I'm not really bleeding." And she grabs the knife, and it's like a trick knife where when you push it in, the blade goes into the handle. So she's like, "Oh, because it's supposed to be.
It's a movie prop."
Yeah.
And then the Charlotte's still freaking out about it
Because they flayed the black guy.
Yeah.
But Abby's like, no, they didn't. Look at the knife they used, and she like pretends to stab herself in the head.
And then the liberal guy, slave owner, is at the front door with a shotgun.
And the zombie hordes are waiting
And
there
there's
for him.
fire everywhere, and he starts to realize, don't you, like, God, you're like children. Don't you realize this is 1842? Now get back to your homes before I open fire the way I did the last time this happened. And he starts getting confused. He's like, they can't be right. This hasn't happened before, but I remember firing on the crowd. I hit a woman in the stomach, and then the blacks attacked me, and I fired the other barrel, but there were too many of them. They beat me to death. Oh God, where am I?
And his eye color changes from blue to brown, so obviously he's back to being that liberal guy.
Yeah, and the zombies say, you are back in the place of pain, Wesley Jackson. We're all back in the place of pain. Because the pain cannot be buried and forgotten. The pain cannot remain in the past or hidden beneath the soil. That which is buried is not gone. That which is planted will grow. There is a weed that thrives upon neglect and flourishes in darkness. Untended becomes a tree of night, and its boughs sag beneath the unbearable weight of what has brought forth.
And he's like, what do you want with me? And we want our freedom. And if
freedom is not given, then we must all repeat this night of pain and suffering until freedom comes, even if that takes forever. The dead have forever.
And slave owner says, you can go to hell.
Yeah, because he's like, "This is my land." So he goes back.
He goes back and forth. I think, but, like, a lot of times they had those like moments of clarity, but the spirit like pulls them back.
Yeah.
And he says you can go to hell. And Swamp Thing comes back and says, "You are already there, all of you. You must break this terrible cycle. The pattern you laid down so long ago has grown to a maze that traps the living." And slave owner is still like, "Fuck you," and shoots at Swamp Thing
with his shotgun.
He thinks he's some kind of like voodoo creature.
Yeah, aberration.
Yeah.
And Swamp Thing falls into the fire, and then Abby comes out, and the slave owner just starts opening fire on the zombies. And Swamp Thing's like enraged by seeing all this violence. He goes, "No, I will not allow this evil to continue." And as he's saying this, he's burning to death, kind of death, and he runs into the house.
Well, technically, yes.
Yeah.
That body's death.
And then he just starts running through the house on fire to burn it down.
Yep.
Saying,
If the bad tree is to be destroyed, you must not bury its fruit. You must burn out the roots. And so he basically just completely destroys the house by burning it down.
Yeah.
And then reforms in its ashes the next day.
Yeah. And all townspeople are like looking back on this bad hallucination. They even view the Swamp Thing as part of hallucination, and he says like Abby tells Swamp Thing like, "Oh, you shouldn't show up because then it's better that they just think you were just part of the dream."
It cuts to Angela and Billy, and she's like, Billy, my love, you're all right. It's me. It's Angie. And he's freaking out, and he sees his own skin on his face is peeled off, and she's like, "Oh God, this nightmare, this horror. I looked into the heart of it, Billy, and it knew me. I knew what I knew what I was, and it knew what I was too. And oh, Billy, I don't want to be that way anymore. Everything feels so different. And he looks down at his own body, and all his skin is flayed off.
Yeah.
But I think we know that it's not. It's just he's stuck for right now, and that
He thinks it to be true.
yeah.
They say Swamp Thing asked that they were not the only casualties, and she says the director is in profound shock. He couldn't even talk, and he's just like he's curled around a camera, or a spotlight.
Oh wait, and the liberal guy dies, right?
Yeah, the liberal guy.
He was in the house when it burned down.
He ran into the house when it started burning.
And somebody says perhaps it found some convenient fingerhold within him, some handle by which he could be dragged in deeper. So I guess it's supposed to symbolize that part of the racist part of him that he tries to act super liberal to cover up. When it got appealed to, he embraced it and couldn't let it go.
Yeah, because he really couldn't let go of that the character of Wesley Jackson. Like, this is my home. Whatever.
Yeah.
Just another actor lost in a role.
Bam, bam.
Okay, what the fuck happens in this last 2 pages?
I forgot about this.
You get a 2-page joke.
This is so weird.
This was
about
weird.
a zombie that stole a van and then crashed the van, and then he shows up at a movie theater, and this guy's basically just talking to him. It's like, we need you to take this job. You have to be here, and you have to sell these movie tickets all day. And it's like, it's a really cramped little box. You got to sell a lot of tickets, and the zombie's like, it'll be fine. When do I start?
And he's like, it's a 24-hour joint. You might be in there a while. And he's like, all week. And he's like, no, I mean, like, a long stint without a meal or bathroom break.
But he also says, like,
He's like, that's fine.
the guy's like, not important, whatever you like. And the guy says, listen, I like your attitude. You don't whine about conditions or union stuff. They don't make workers like you anymore. In my other business, we can use 10 guys like you. And
He says, I think that could be arranged.
yeah.
This is my box and my own little window. These are my tickets. And he's like, right, listen, I gotta leave. Dinner date. Like they say, eat, drink, and be merry for tomorrow. And then he looks, and it shows the zombie's like ugly face, and he's like,
You see the zombie for clarity for the first time, and he's just like, forget it.
Yep, I gotta go. Jeez, is it that late already? Ta-da!
I hated this page when I first read the story. Reading it again, I do think this is commentary on modern workers, where
but it seems so out of place.
it does,
Yeah,
but it
it
is very
does.
valid to be like, how many people now expect their workers to work on unbearable conditions and work for free? And basically, what they're saying is, man, I wish workers today were like slaves, like in the old days when we could get people just do a job. And
When
not
you say they, are you saying the guy who works there, or Alan Moore is saying that?
Some people want
It
that.
comes across as a joke, because you look at like the previous page, it's like all the faces, all the things they're saying about like,
It is
oh
a
man,
joke, but it seems like a tongue-in-cheek observation on the modern-day worker. I think I kind of like it. A lot of people, business owners, they make their workers work overtime without pay. They make them work in unbearable conditions, and they treat them poorly. And this is treated like a joke, but when I read it again, I think I can get what Alan Moore is going for, where like we were talking about things in the past repeating, like if slavery were available again, how many workers now deep down would really like to have that kind of labor freely available?
I felt like this left a bad taste in my mouth. Just this weird, because it kind of came out of nowhere, and it's just like, haha, look, this black zombie is like a slave. He's gonna sit in this little.
I'm
booth
on Darryl's side. I think it detracts.
Imagine this instead ends on that one big page of Billy looking down at his flayed body, and then it just ends instead of.
I definitely get it, because I felt, like I said, I felt this way the first time you guys read it. But I think reading it again, I get it more what Al Moore was going for.
It kind of seems, at least it seems like to me, like you're twisting your own view to spin this into a positive, where I think the first impression.
No, but like maybe it's because like now when we were discussing it again, and we're talking about how the past repeats, and now I'm seeing that motif here too.
Well, I've read it 3 times, and I think it's dumb.
Well, you know what's a good thing? We can all have our opinions.
No. Oh wait, we're not coordinated.
We're allowed to be divisive.
Yeah. We're not coordinated issues. What a fucking dumb joke.
I like how you Ryan always shits on me for being so negative and him being so positive. Then I'm positive, and now he's just like, no, agree with me, fly. Fuck you, Ryan.
That's Swamp Man.
Yeah. So
Swamp Man and Animal Thing.
recap Swamp Thing and Animal.
And
Honestly, when you guys always talked about Swamp Thing and Animal Man, I'm like, these are the dumbest fucking names. What could this even be about? But
Well, maybe Phil, maybe this is should be a lesson. Every time we talk about something and you say the name alone, they think it must be dumb. Maybe you should have an open mind and say,
Phil's learning to be less prejudiced. Swamp Thing taught him something.
yeah, like seriously, like you put so much value in a name. Like names can be personally weird. It's like some people.
Yeah, Phil, would a rose by any other name still smell so sweet, dickhead?
But you have to admit, when something's called Swamp Thing, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
let's talk about women's problems and racial issues.
Well, maybe it's because I read so much comics, but a lot of times, a lot of comics will purposely name their comics something stupid.
No, they make stupid shit, and then a good writer comes along and it's like, I can make something great with stupid shit. Because you said that Swamp Thing was made to be like a creature from the Black Lagoon, and that's it. And Alan Moore was like, I'm going to make this cool. So Swamp Thing was intended to be a generic fucking swamp monster, but someone like Alan Moore comes along and is like, I can make this social commentary.
I just don't get why you are always throwing up on names. I just don't get it.
Because a name's the first impression.
I could see you getting this mad if Phil was like, Alan Moore's Swamp
No,
Thing
because it's so close-minded. It's the definition of judging a book by its cover. It's the definition. I've never.
That is true.
I've never met anyone who's close-minded as Phil, and Phil's supposed to be a fucking literature person, and he's so close.
Sly. Let me propose something. You say you can't judge a book by its cover, but imagine the book is a stick figure drawing of a 5-year-old.
So Phil's saying, but right now, is arguing you can't judge a book by its cover. He's literally saying close-mindedness is a trait, a value, of virtue. Fuck you, Phil.
No, you can't.
Seeing
You can't
a
judge a
name,
book.
it gives you an impression. It's
No,
still
it does not
important.
always. Swamp Thing, you said yourself, Swamp Thing is bad, and you're saying like otherwise can come in and make it better.
No, we didn't know what to expect from Swamp.
So, but you know, Phil
Yeah.
said I expected dumb things.
I expected it to be a swamp monster.
Yes, and it was a swamp monster, but maybe there's more to it than just a swamp
Let's
monster.
read Swamp Thing #1 then next week.
No, but my point is, people have worked on these books for like 30, fucking 40 years, and now you're going to technicality saying, oh, other people made it better. So maybe, how about look at this? Maybe good things can be done with a good project. Maybe don't be so fucking close-minded all the time, you fucking asshole.
Okay.
Anyway, you're laughing at me, but it annoys me so much to have a guy, every time I talk to him, always say, it sounds dumb, I won't read it. It's annoying to me.
Okay, I do read it though, right? I do read. I read shit like Doctor Strange and that names that are stupid, but you're like, the writing is good, the character's cool. I give it a chance. I'm saying that these names originally when they made them are cheesy and they belie the depth that lies below. Like Swamp Thing sounds like it's a generic ripoff of a swamp monster, and it turns out to be a lot of social commentary. I'm just saying these things like they're cheesy names, and you can do really great things with Fantastic Four.
I'm just tired because every time I'm sick and tired of always having to feel like I have to justify things I like because Phil's always so close-minded about it.
It's like, that's what being a nerd is. That's like the whole thing. That's
I know,
what
but
we
I'm
do.
just kind of tired of it, especially
Also,
with Phil.
comic names are generally like not great.
Yeah, he's generally apprehensive of comics. It's harder for him to be like, hey, this thing's good when it has something that has a silly name, even if it is.
It's not just me, right, Darryl? You've heard Swamp Thing. You didn't think it was going to be like.
Yeah, again, I thought, like, I didn't know what to expect. Knowing Alan Moore was attached to it, I'm like, okay, I'm looking forward to reading this. If I didn't know anything about this beforehand, I would have read it being like, this is Swamp Thing would have been similar to like the Dracula issues we read last time, where I'm like, I'm just expecting a silly comic story instead of like an observational story.
This is just, it's probably just a personal thing because Phil does it every time, and like I don't know if you do every time, Darryl, but Phil doesn't matter what the title of the book is. If it's fucking like everything I suggest, everything I believe is dumb. Phil's always right. I'm just stupid.
well, it's hard when you have stuff where it's like Ryan's like he goes into space and gets raped by a satellite.
Yeah, for 1,000 years.
Phil likes weird shit all the time, but if I like something that's remotely weird, it's fuck me. Like I'm a piece of
but
shit.
Sly, do we make fun of Phil for weird shit he likes?
No, we don't.
Yes, you
Yeah,
what?
we do.
Fuck you, Sly. You can't tell me you don't.
You like the shit you like is fucking like Dynasty Warriors and garbage like that.
No, I mean, you make fun of every single weird anime that could actually be cool, but you're like,
I make fun of him just troll you, but you fucking.
wait. You control me, but when I make fun of you for Aquaman wearing a bra or Ant-Man being stupid, it's like I'm obviously trolling there. I don't think Ant-Man is actually dumb, but when you're like he's so cool, he can turn into an ant and talk to ants, it's like I remember thinking that I have to make fun of Sly. I have to make fun of Sly for this.
Okay, guys. Recap
this
page.
is-
No,
Do
this is
Do you regret reading this book?
no.
No.
Are we all in agreement that it was pretty great?
Yeah.
I didn't like the second story as much. 'Cause I
As
didn't
much,
feel
or
like
did you
it was-
dislike
But
it?
do you regret it?
Oh no, of course.
Is it as good as Nemesis, Darryl?
Nemesis is way worse than this. Nemesis is worse than a lot of the books. It's just I had way more fun with it than something like the Dracula stuff. But this is actually like it's pretty meaningful, and I feel like even though in the second story, like I got kind of caught up on that you turned the liberal guy into the racist, and then the racist girl into the lover of the black guy. I just didn't know what he was trying to go for there. And when you guys were explaining, it's like, oh, it's secretly bringing out and showing it's like, well, your racist tendencies, like, you could secretly harbor them even if you think you're meaning well. But at the end of the story, like, it hinged a lot on him repeating the same cycle, and I just wish he brought that more into the story about, like, that guy, or, like, maybe that was his house, or maybe he was, like, proud of his heritage, or it did something to connect him to the past, because it just seemed like that guy was being really heavily manipulated by the house.
Just because he was there.
Just because he was there, and even if he had those tendencies, it didn't do enough with the pages to establish that. Like, instead of showing when Billy was doing coke, why not do something to be like, have him say more of those things where he's like, what's wrong with those people? Because it's weird when you introduce him and you put him up against someone that is more racist than him immediately.
Spoilers, Darryl, everything you just said is what I felt when I first read this issue, and this is why actually I suggested it above the other Swamp Thing we were planning on doing it, which is more, I think, less controversially good, I guess. And then when I was reading it, Phil and Ryan gave up the reasons why I like it better, and now you kind of swing it back into my middle position where I do think they could have done a little more to establish that guy was a secret racist.
Yeah, I just wish there was more, because
fair.
I felt like there was this beautiful kernel of a story here that could talk about the repeating the past, and like when Phil was talking about that the people didn't move far away, but that was thrown away in just like one line about how her dad was buried here. It wasn't really something that Alan Moore specifically invoked.
No, but it's common of small towns. Like when Abby says like all the descendants still like they hire locals to be extras. It's like it's implying that these people are not, there's not a lot of social mobility here, and it's very common in small towns for the same generations of people to just be living.
But
in
you
the
could
same
also
place.
look at it as that they wanted to stay close to family, just like how when she saw her dad, they were having a good time and they just wanted to be free and party and celebrate. Like it wasn't necessarily they were being held down as much as that they just like being around each other. Just like how it's like old friends and enemies ended up hugging when they emerged from the ground. Like it didn't seem to be condemning the actions of the past as much as it was like when the zombies rose up, it was like this weird celebration of we want to be free, so we need to get rid of this house, which means that we need to get rid of this slave plantation guy that was being in control of the house, who was not a racist but kind of was inside. I felt like the werewolf story was way more clean and coherent, and I liked its narrative beats a lot more. I felt like it was a lot easier to understand.
I mean, I do agree with you that the first one was better.
But I in no way like dislike this story greatly. I just wanted more from it, but it was good, and this is what I'd want to see if something tries and doesn't meet my expectations. It's like I want this level of quality instead of something where it's like,
Oh yeah, well,
storm kissing Dracula was pretty good.
Darryl said, he'd rather have something try and succeed. So
yeah, yeah.
I'd rather have something try and succeed than try and fail. That's
No, I didn't feel like this succeeded. I wouldn't call this like a success. I just think I wouldn't call it a failure either. I don't know.
Okay, I think we've said enough.
Yeah, but this is one of the best we've read.
Yeah,
Which surprise, it's Alan Morgan, so now like the two best that me and Phil have been on for.
Yeah. So real quick, a letter. This one comes from Twitter. Is it fair to judge a superhero by its name?
See 20 minutes ago.
I'm kidding. Fuck you guys. Okay. So, real quick, I just want to thank... I recently asked people to send us pictures of their collections, and they're really cool. So thanks, Matt and Gabby and Malcolm and Owen. And I want to start using the Divisive Issues hashtag. So when you tweet at us, use hashtag Divisive Issues. And check out all the other shows on the Comrade Radio Network. And rate and review, subscribe, all that stuff. So, anything else, guys? Recommendations?
Yeah. Do you have anything to recommend?
Yeah, I have a very quick one. If you like Abby and Swamp Thing and want to read another more modern run with them, or see Abby kind of reinvented as a badass instead of a like supporting relationship kind of character, I recommend Scott Snyder and Yannick Paquette's New 52 Swamp Thing book. It's released. It's collected in one gorgeous hardcover, and it's awesome. You should read it.
Phil?
I don't know if I've read anything like this that I was like, you should... Like it was a very unique story to me, so I would have to just recommend like other Alan Moore. Like read V for Vendetta or Watchmen.
Yeah, I'm recommending to myself to read Watchmen again.
Yeah, Watchmen's so fucking good.
What about you, Sly?
My recommendation is Marvel's. Like you thought Swamp Thing was dumb. What about Marvel's attempt at a Swamp Thing character called Man Thing?
What? No, don't judge it, Sly.
And his book is called Giant Size Man Thing. And people look at that book and say, "Want to see my Giant Size Man Thing?" But to also boast that point that Phil's saying, "Fuck dumb names, fuck Swamp Thing, fuck Man Thing." Dumb,
I never said fuck Swamp Thing.
But to boast that point, now you're saying making fun of Man Thing. But Man Thing it started out as another swamp monster story. And Steve Gerber, the guy who created Howard the Duck, he turned the swamp into the nexus of all realities, basically a place where all dimensions meet. And he made it more about the Swamp Thing being a defender of this realm of existence from other realms, and he made a more trippy story. And just to bolster how good Steve Gerber's run on it was, Neil Gaiman and other writers said their stuff was inspired by Steve Gerber's Man Thing specifically in a lot of ways. So fuck you, Phil, for judging another book by its cover right now, Man Thing.
How do you know I judged it?
Because you were like, oh, Man Thing.
I didn't say that.
Yes.
My recommendation: Phil, go to hell.
Yeah, my recommendation is Phil, go to hell. But yeah, I guess Steve Gerber's Man Thing. It's in its own trade. Get it.
Okay. So thanks for joining us. We've been Divisive Issues. I'm a disposable douche.
I'm Aunt Jemima.
I judge a book by its cover.
And I've been the anger in the darkness, turning unreleased, unspoken. Its mouth red wound, its eyes hungry for the moon.
Stay in continuity.